1 minute and 47 seconds. That's exactly how long Chris Hemsworth's sentence lasted. And I think what makes Thor so special is, he was saying, when he heard a sound in the middle of the studio that made the words freeze in his mouth. Tip, 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 tip. Rhythmic, metallic, familiar, but in the wrong place. Chris's eyes automatically shifted toward the sound, and what he saw shocked him. An 8-year-old boy, a Thor action figure, and in the boy's ear, a stethoscope. He was listening to Thor's chest. Jimmy Fallon hadn't noticed yet. The audience didn't understand yet, but Chris understood. And his next move would trigger one of the most emotional moments in The Tonight Show's 70-year history. Studio 6B was pulsing with pre-show energy. The Roots were fine-tuning their instruments, audience members settling into their seats with excited chatter. Tonight's guest was Chris Hemsworth, returning to promote his latest action film. Everything seemed routine. What nobody noticed during the pre-show setup was the family in row 4, seats 8, 9, and 10. Rebecca Miller, 38 years old, sat between her 2 children, Ethan, age 8, and his older sister Sophia, age 11. Ethan clutched something with an intensity that made his knuckles white. It was a Thor action figure, about 6 inches tall, wearing the character's signature red cape. But this wasn't just any toy. Taped carefully to Thor's chest was a medical stethoscope, the silver disc positioned exactly where a heart would be. Rebecca had debated whether to let Ethan bring it. "Sweetheart," she'd said that morning while packing for their trip to New York, "maybe we should leave Thor at home. What if people think it's strange?" But Ethan had looked at her with those serious brown eyes, eyes that had seen far too much for an 8-year-old, and said simply, "Mom, I need to show Chris. He needs to know." So here they were, Ethan's hands wrapped protectively around his modified Thor figure, waiting for the moment he'd been dreaming about for 8 months, ever since the doctors had said those miraculous words. The transplant was successful. The show opened with Jimmy's signature energy. His monologue was sharp, earning genuine laughs from the audience. When he introduced Chris Hemsworth, the applause was thunderous. Chris walked out in a perfectly fitted navy suit, his charisma instantly filling the room. He waved to the crowd, gave Jimmy a warm hug, and settled into the guest chair with that easy Australian confidence. The 2 men had great chemistry, the kind that comes from years of mutual respect. "So, Chris," Jimmy said, settling into his chair with a grin, "you're back as Thor for what, the millionth time?" Chris laughed, that deep Australian laugh that made everyone feel at ease. "Feels like it, mate. But you know, every time I put on that costume, every time I pick up that hammer, I remember why I love this character. Thor represents something special. He's powerful but vulnerable, godlike but learning what it means to be human." "That's beautiful," Jimmy said, nodding appreciatively. "And the kids must love having Thor as a dad." "Oh, they're brutal about it," Chris grinned, shaking his head. "My daughter once told me that her friend's dad is cooler because he's a plumber. Apparently, fixing toilets is more impressive than saving the universe. So much for being a superhero at home." The audience laughed, and Jimmy was about to follow up with another question when Chris continued, his tone becoming more thoughtful, more vulnerable. "But honestly, Jimmy, the fan mail I get, especially from kids, it's humbling. It really is. Parents write to me about how Thor helped their children through chemotherapy, how the character gave them strength during impossible times, how kids would wear Thor costumes to their treatments. There was this one letter from a mother whose son..." That's when Chris heard it. Tip, 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 tip. A soft, rhythmic sound, metallic and deliberate. It didn't belong to the Roots instruments. It wasn't coming from the cameras or the crew. It was coming from the audience, from row 4, where an 8-year-old boy with sandy brown hair was pressing a stethoscope to a Thor action figure's chest, listening with an intensity that stopped Chris mid-sentence. Chris's eyes locked onto Ethan. The boy was completely absorbed in what he was doing, oblivious to the cameras, the lights, the hundreds of people around him. He had the stethoscope in his ears, and his small face was filled with concentration as he listened to something only he could hear. But Chris could hear it too now. The tip-tip-tip-tip of the stethoscope's diaphragm tapping against the plastic figure as Ethan adjusted it, searching for the perfect spot, as if trying to find a real heartbeat in a toy's chest. "Chris," Jimmy said, noticing his guest had gone completely silent, his sentence hanging unfinished in the air. "You okay, mate?" Chris didn't answer immediately. He was staring at row 4, at the boy, at the modified Thor figure, at something that triggered a recognition in him that went beyond celebrity and stardom, something deeply, profoundly human. "Jimmy," Chris said softly, still looking at the audience, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to ask someone something." Jimmy followed Chris's gaze and spotted Ethan. The cameras swiveled to capture the moment, and suddenly everyone could see what Chris had seen. The boy, the toy, the stethoscope, the absolute concentration on that small face. "The little guy in row 4, Chris said, his voice carrying across the studio with surprising gentleness. "With the Thor figure. Buddy, can you stand up for me?" Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. For a moment he looked terrified, like a child called on in class who hasn't been paying attention. His mother, Rebecca, squeezed his shoulder encouragingly. Sophia gave him a little nudge. Slowly, Ethan stood up, still clutching his modified Thor figure against his chest, protecting it like it was the most valuable thing in the world. "What's your name, mate?" "Ethan," the boy said, barely audible. "Ethan, I love your Thor figure. But I noticed something. Is that a stethoscope taped to his chest?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, I'm listening to his heartbeat." The studio fell silent. Even the Roots stopped playing. "His heartbeat?" Chris repeated gently. "Can you tell me why?" Ethan looked at his mother, who nodded through tears. The boy took a deep breath. "Because Thor's heart is in my chest," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the silent studio. "And I wanted to show you." Chris felt his own heart stop. "What do you mean, buddy?" "I had a heart transplant 8 months ago," Ethan explained. "The doctors said I needed a new heart or I would die. When I woke up, my mom told me that a brave kid gave me his heart. His name was Lucas, and his favorite superhero was Thor." The studio was completely silent. Chris walked off the stage without asking permission. He just walked directly into the audience toward Ethan. Jimmy immediately followed. When Chris reached Ethan's row, people shifted to create space. Chris knelt down at eye level with the boy. "Ethan," Chris said, voice thick with emotion, "can you tell me about Lucas?" "Lucas was 9, Ethan said, his words coming more confidently now. "He died in a car accident. But before he died, he told his parents that if anything ever happened to him, he wanted to help other kids. His parents said he loved Thor more than anything in the world. He had Thor posters all over his room, and he had Thor bed sheets, and he always said that one day he'd be strong like Thor and help people." Rebecca Miller, Ethan's mother, was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. Sophia had her arm around her mother's shoulders, trying to be strong even as her own tears fell. "Lucas's mom and dad wrote me a letter after the transplant," Ethan continued, his small hand touching his chest where the scar lay hidden beneath his Thor t-shirt. "They said Lucas would be so happy knowing his heart was keeping another kid alive. They sent me his Thor figure, this one, and told me that Lucas always listened to his own heartbeat with a stethoscope and imagined he was as strong as Thor. So now I do the same thing. I listen to Thor's heart, but really I'm listening to Lucas's heart, the heart that's keeping me alive." Chris's eyes glistened with tears. He gently touched the Thor figure. "So you listen to Thor's heartbeat because you're listening to Lucas's heart." Ethan nodded vigorously. "Every night before I go to sleep, I listen, and I tell Lucas thank you. I tell him I'm going to be brave like Thor, like him." Jimmy had his hand over his mouth. This wasn't television anymore. This was pure human connection. Chris stood up and addressed the studio. "I've played Thor for over a decade. I've said the lines about being worthy and fighting for those who can't fight for themselves, but I've never truly understood what it means until right now. Because Lucas Harper, a 9-year-old boy, lived those ideals. He didn't just watch the hero, he became one." The audience erupted into applause, but Chris raised his hand. "And Ethan, you're carrying on Lucas's legacy. You're the living proof that heroes never really die. They just find new hearts to beat in." Chris knelt down again. "Ethan, I want everyone in this studio to understand what you understand. That a heartbeat isn't just a sound, it's a promise, it's a second chance. It's love that continues even after we're gone. Chris looked at Jimmy. Could we have complete silence? Jimmy nodded. The studio went completely quiet. I want everyone to close their eyes, Chris said. Put your hand on your chest. Feel it. Tip, 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 tip. That's not just biology. That's life. That's every moment you've been given. 240 people placed their hands over their hearts. At home, millions did the same. Lucas Harper's heart is beating right now, Chris continued softly, in Ethan's chest, and as long as it beats, Lucas is still here, still helping people, still being a hero. Chris opened his eyes. Can I listen? To Lucas? To his heart? Ethan looked at his mother, who nodded. The boy pulled up his shirt, revealing the long scar down his chest. Chris took the stethoscope and placed it in his ears. With infinite gentleness, he placed it against Ethan's chest. The studio held its breath. Chris closed his eyes and listened, his face transformed. After a long moment, he opened his eyes, filled with tears. It's strong, Chris whispered. It's so strong, Ethan. Lucas's heart is powerful, just like he was. Then Chris handed the stethoscope to Jimmy. Everyone needs to hear this. Jimmy listened. His reaction was immediate, his composure shattered. That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, he said, voice cracking. The stethoscope began to move through the audience. Person after person listened to Ethan's chest, to Lucas's heart. Some whispered thank yous, some hugged Ethan. It was chaos and beauty and grief and joy. When the stethoscope came back to Chris, he knelt beside Ethan again. Ethan, I need to tell you something, Chris said. The real superpower isn't strength or a magic hammer. It's the courage to accept help. Lucas gave you his strength. That's what makes you both heroes. Chris reached into his jacket and pulled out something that made the audience gasp. A small metal replica of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, on a keychain. This is from the actual movie set, Chris said. I've carried it for 6 years, but I think it belongs with you now, because you understand what it means to be worthy better than I ever could. He placed the keychain in Ethan's hand. You carry 2 hearts now, yours and Lucas's. That makes you twice as strong as Thor. Whenever you feel scared, you touch this hammer and remember, you are worthy. Lucas chose you. Ethan threw his arms around Chris's neck. Chris hugged him back, and in that embrace, the boundary between celebrity and regular person completely dissolved. Chris stood up. The Harpers, Lucas's family, they're watching at home, so I want to say this directly. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, tonight your son was honored as the hero he truly was. His heart is still beating. His kindness is still spreading. He turned to the camera. Lucas, mate, if you can hear this, thank you. Thank you for being braver than any character I've ever played. You're a real-life Thor. The studio erupted. People standing, crying, holding each other. Jimmy made his way back to the stage, wiping his eyes. We're taking a commercial break because I literally cannot speak right now. The audience laughed through tears. But when we come back, I want to talk about how we can help families like the Millers and the Harpers, because organ donation saves lives. When the show came back, they didn't talk about the movie. They talked about life, about what matters. Chris, Jimmy said, I've never experienced anything like what just happened. Neither have I, Chris admitted. But that was the most important thing I'll ever be part of. What do you want people to take away from this? I want people to understand that heroes are real, Chris said. They're in hospitals right now. Their families making the hardest decision of their lives. They're kids like Ethan who honor their gift by living courageously. And they're people like Lucas, who at 9 years old understood that helping others was the most important thing. He paused. Playing Thor has been the privilege of my career, but tonight taught me I'm not the hero. I'm just the actor. The real heroes are fighting battles we never see. The show ended differently. Jimmy looked into the camera. If you're moved by Ethan and Lucas's story, please consider becoming an organ donor. 1 person can save up to 8 lives. Chris added, and if you're a kid who loves superheroes, remember you don't need superpowers to be a hero. Lucas was 9 years old and he saved a life. That's what real heroes do. The video went viral within hours. Jarrett Lucas Hart trended worldwide. organ donation registrations spiked by 300%. 3 months later, both families appeared together. The Harpers came with the Millers. Chris arranged his schedule to be there. David Harper spoke about donating Lucas's organs. "He used to say he wanted to be a superhero when he grew up," David said. "But he didn't need to grow up. He already was one." Ethan walked over to David Harper. "Mr. Harper," Ethan said, "I want you to listen." And there, David Harper placed the stethoscope against Ethan's chest and listened to his son's heartbeat in another child's body. David smiled through tears. "Strong," he whispered. "So strong, Lucas." Chris kept his promise. In every interview, he mentioned Lucas and Ethan. He became a passionate advocate for organ donation. Studio 6B has a new tradition. Row 4, Seat 9 has a plaque. In honor of Lucas Harper and all organ donors. Heroes sit here. Some hearts beat in the bodies they were born in. Others travel to new chests, new lives. But all hearts have the same purpose: to keep us alive, to remind us that every beat is precious. Because you don't have to grow up to be a hero. You just have to be brave enough to help someone when they need it most. And if you do that, your heart keeps beating long after you're gone, in the lives you saved. That's what heroes do. They save lifetimes.